The loneliest people are the kindest. The saddest people smile the brightest. And the most damaged people are the wisest. All because they do not wish to see anyone suffer the way they do. A quote by an anonymous person. To walk alone is a choice. But just because someone chooses to take the desolate path, that doesn't stop you from seeking them out. What happens when someone close to you chooses to be alone, to distance themselves for personal reasons? A lot of times it's a cry for comfort, and when those cries go unheard, they feel unwanted, so they continue to live on their own. They eventually write the last pages to the story of their life without the people close to them in the last chapter. But what happens when the last chapter is abruptly cut short and your choice to love that person from a distance turns out to be a fatal mistake? Because now the last pages are your responsibility to write. But because you weren't around, you can't finish the book, leaving the ending a total mystery. June 14th, 1992. The world will make way for Tamber Johnson. She would be born to her mother Valinda and her father, J.R. The place she called home was Martinsburg, West Virginia, a small city with just over 18,000 inhabitants. Tamber is described in her early years as someone who was witty, a leader at a young age. By the age of 9, she would receive the nickname of Tumbling Tamber. She received this nickname because at this age she would begin cheerleading. Outside of being a cheerleader, she really enjoyed school. She was a straight-A student. She was well behaved, and she also was eager to learn. Achieving those goals at her young age must have been very complicated because when she was young, she would lose both of her parents. First her father, and then she would lose her mother at the young age of 11. After the untimely passing of her mother, she would move in with her older sister, and she would now be under her care. As time progressed, she would keep her good grades. She would also begin performing in beauty pageants. At the age of 12, she was asked what she wanted to be when she was an adult, and she answered, a plastic surgeon. She would ultimately end up at MHS. While at that high school, she would continue on with her cheerleading. But by the time she left school, the dream of being a plastic surgeon was in the wind, and she had other plans. By the age of 17, she was described as a free spirit, and she was going to pursue a modeling career. But although she was a young bright star at the age of 17, this age would also be the beginning of her mental health problems. This undoubtedly was her past sneaking back up to haunt her because she experienced a lot of trauma at a young age. But now that she's going into her adult years, she's realizing the true impact it has had on her life. Tamber would later be diagnosed as a schizophrenic who also experienced episodes of paranoia. In her early adult years, Tamber was truly a free spirit. She loved to travel. She would periodically take trips out of town. But every time she went out of town and came back home to her family, things seemed to be a little different. Her family says that her diagnosis was keeping her out of touch with true reality, and she began to alienate herself from her family. She would still keep in touch, but it was on a rare basis. She would mainly call home on holidays and significant events. But other than that, Tamber was out living the free life. By the year of 2015, a 23-year-old Tamber Johnson would make a transition from Virginia to Miami, Florida. Tamber was very active on her social media. She maintained a strong presence, showing off her life and how she was living. And by the looks of it, everything seemed to be okay. From the social media presence of Tamber, everything in her life seemed well put together. She was undoubtedly the life of the party. She was very energetic. She enjoyed paddleboarding, fine dining, with crab being one of her favorite dishes. Alongside living the Miami life, she was still pursuing her modeling career, and things were actually headed in the right direction. She landed a few local gigs, and she was getting her name out there. She was young, full of life, pursuing her dreams, and she had every intention on achieving them. By the year of 2023, she's described as completely alienated from her family. By now, she rarely speaks to them. Being schizophrenic really put a wedge in between her and her family. And this would prove to be haunting, because something was on the horizon that no one saw coming. February 21st, 2023. Inmates on work release are picking up trash on Greenbrier Street, that's located in Charleston, West Virginia. While performing their duties, one of the inmates would spot something odd in a grassy area. But upon further inspection, this inmate would notice that this was an actual human body that was covered with a blanket. Once he reports his finding, the authorities would show up to that location. Upon entering the location, they would discover the body of a young female. She would be wearing a pink Joe Fresh brand pullover shirt, purple sweatpants, off-white kid shoes with tan soles. She also had black acrylic nails with glitter on them. Whenever finding someone, one of the first things the authorities look for is identification. However, this person didn't possess an ID. The authorities would analyze and process the scene, and then ship the body to the medical examiner's office for further investigation.
Yeah, police in Charleston are investigating a body found on Greenbrier Street. News Channel 3's Kimberly Donahue is there now. And Kimberly, what have you learned so far?
Good afternoon, Susan. Right now, Charleston police say it's too early to tell who the person is or if foul play is even involved in their death. Charleston Police Lieutenant Tony Hazlett says an inmate crew had been cleaning up along Greenbrier Street around 2 this afternoon when one inmate spotted a blanket with a body underneath it near Airport Road. The body had been found in a grassy section of the street, so he says it would not have been spotted from the road because this is a high-traffic area. We're just a short distance away from West Virginia International Yeager Airport and the West Virginia State House. Hazlett says no other calls came in before the inmate spotted the body, and it's unclear how long the body had been there, and he says it'll take some time waiting before more is known.
With no clue to who the victim was, they would attempt to do a fingerprint scan in hopes of identifying the person. However, this didn't work out. They would even check the missing persons list to see if this person resembled anyone who has been reported missing lately. But this also didn't pan out. With no way of identifying the victim, the police would be forced to turn to the media in hopes to generate new leads. They would release a description of the victim. The description read, light-skinned black female between the ages of 20 and 40. They would even release a few pictures of identifiable marks in form of tattoos. They were hoping by releasing the images of the tattoos, someone would be able to identify the victim. But as the days began to turn into weeks, it was seeming as if it wasn't going to be that easy. But to make matters worse, upon finding the victim, the authorities couldn't determine exactly how long the victim had been there. But they could say, due to the state of the body, she had been there for a short period of time. With no identification and no answers as to why she was in that spot, they would be forced to wait on autopsy results to get a better perspective on what happened. But when the autopsy was conducted and it was concluded, they would find that there were no fractured bones and no signs of trauma. The toxicology reports would also show that it wasn't an overdose. The authorities would officially come to the conclusion that it wasn't a homicide. They don't know how the victim died, but due to no physical injuries, they weren't looking to hold anyone responsible, and this was no more than a mere death investigation. The month of March would greet the authorities, and they still hadn't identified her. They would decide to take a sample of DNA and turn it in to the FBI for further research. But in this case, that would take months. April would come, and then May, and then June, and then July, and there was still no identification on the Jane Doe. But luckily, on September 26th of 2023, things would turn around. The FBI would reach out to the West Virginia Police Department and let them know that they had had a hit on the DNA submitted to them and that they found a corresponding relative. Through the match on the DNA, they were able to track down the family of Tamber Johnson, and the Jane Doe would be a Jane Doe no more. She would officially be identified as 31-year-old Tamber Johnson.
Police have made strides into an investigation we told you about back in February of a body found in Charleston.
Charleston police say that body was identified as 31-year-old Tamber Johnson of Falling Waters, West Virginia.
During the investigation, we were able to get DNA from the body, and we sent it off to the FBI National DNA Index system, and a match came through actually through the Florida DNA system, and we were able to identify Miss Johnson. We talked to her family, and she said Miss Johnson was transient, and the last known address they had of her was in Florida. They do not communicate very often, so that's why they did not report her missing. But so it was kind of a shock to them when we told them that what we discovered.
As to how that individual ended up in this field, that is still unknown, and Charleston police are working to get answers to those questions.
With the victim now identified as Tamber Johnson, they closed the case. Again, they weren't investigating this as a homicide, but there are a few unanswered questions. To the family's knowledge, Tamber Johnson was still in Florida, and they didn't know that she had returned home to West Virginia. After being found in the state that she was in, the authorities would draw the conclusion that she was most likely a homeless person who just didn't have anyone. When Tamber was found, the sheet was found pulled over the body as if someone was covering themselves up. She wasn't wrapped. And with no real evidence to show trauma or any significant event, they would also say that hypothermia was a possibility. But determining whether or not a victim died from hypothermia is extremely hard and almost impossible, just like a lot of other causes of death. In order to support the theory of hypothermia, there have to be some circumstances surrounding the case, such as being found in a freezer or found on a mountain covered with snow. Your surroundings play a big role in the medical examiner determining whether or not it was hypothermia. Now, I do have a few problems with this case, one of them being the actual area that she was found in. She was found in a secluded area in tall grass, which obviously looks like a hiding spot. The authorities also thought that the victim was homeless and that she was merely laying in the grass, covered up with a sheet, trying to shield herself from the elements. But there's also a problem with that. She had no purse, no phone, no ID. But to make that situation even more unreasonable, the airport was right up the street. If she was trying to shield herself from the elements, why not just go to the airport? a public place where she could sleep, have shelter, and no one would bat an eye. I'm sorry, but I just have a hard time believing that out of all the locations she could have chose to sleep at, she chose a secluded area surrounded by grass. It just seems just unreal, especially when there are other causes of death that are also hard to detect, such as certain forms of suffocation. But I think that one of the most haunting things about this case is what she was going through a year prior to being found. In November of 2021, Tamber Johnson would discover that she was becoming a mother. She would take to her social media to post and say that her child was almost 12 weeks old. And then she would make a couple of other posts about her pregnancy. And then on April 26th of 2022, her last post would arise. This would in fact be another pregnancy post. But after that, a girl who is normally heavily active on her social media disappears. There is no word as to if she gave birth to the baby or if the baby even reached full term. There is also no indication as to who the father is, because she was always a private person. Although she showed her life, she wasn't really big on showing her boyfriends or her love life. The fact that she was discovering that she was about to be a mother months before being found on a secluded road in a grassy area has really boggled my mind. And I feel like that's something that truly needs to be looked into. I found myself questioning whether the authorities truly believe that this case wasn't a homicide, or did they not just want to investigate it due to lack of evidence. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep.
So we living. Yeah.
I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sun on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain.
You can tune a piano, but you can't tune a fish.
When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift, uplifting rush of quiet birds in a circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die. There are a lot of unanswered questions in this case. Answers that we will probably never receive because, again, the case is closed. However, the circumstances that surround it are very mysterious. Rest in peace, Tamber Johnson. I truly hope whatever you went through comes to the surface, because the rest of your story deserves to be told. Thank you for being a light for others.
Woo! Early birthday celebration. Crabs on the beach. Woo! Yeah! Check it out. Miami on a Tuesday. Hey, on a Tuesday. Miami, Florida.